You make the distinction between what we say to our children and what experience says to our girls. So to sort of shorthand your story, because today is the pub date, you grew up with a relatively normal childhood. You felt empowered. You had some of the normal bumps along the way and some of the signals that the world was giving you about how you should lean into the stereotypes, being blonde, being a girl, for example. But fast forward. You're a married mother and you've run successful businesses of your own. And then one day you're running down the toy aisle with your 9-year-old daughter, fresh from sports practice, looking for a toy for birthday party. Describe your light bulb moment.
Well, yeah, it was certainly a aha moment. And
or should we call it your gag reflex moment?
Yeah. So yeah, and absolutely. I mean, so you were correct about my daughter, and she had just gotten done playing soccer, and we're running through this toy store, and every parent has had this moment where you're frantically looking for a birthday gift because your kid is going to a party in 30 minutes, right? So we're running up and down the aisle of our local toy store when a line of dolls just stopped me in my tracks. They had on short skirts, crop top, belly button ring, big hair, lots of makeup. I look at my daughter, I look at the dolls, and I pick up one of the dolls, and I bought the doll. So I have it here to show you. It called Lovely Lola. So at that moment, I mean, I'm looking at this doll, and I'm looking at my normal kid, and I thought, what in the world are we marketing to girls?
Look at those lips. Just look at the lips.
I know, right?
I would not wear that lipstick now.
I know, right? So, I mean, I literally had a meltdown in the toy store. But I brought that doll home and I showed my husband. I said, listen, I am so sick and tired of these negative images that are marketed to girls. I think I can do something about it. I think I can create a positive image doll that encourages girls to be healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally through sports and physical activity.
How much thought do you put into the dolls in your daughter's bedroom, or into how those dolls affect the way she sees herself? One woman took a gasp-worthy moment in the toy aisle full of hyper-sexualized dolls and turned it into a fight we should all get behind, because our daughters and our sons are watching. Jodi Bondi Norgaard is the author of More Than a Doll, How Creating a Sports Doll Turned Into a Fight to End Gender Stereotypes, and it's available today wherever you get your books. Jodi is an entrepreneur, author, keynote speaker, and feminist activist pushing media and retail to do a better job portraying girls beyond stereotypes. She's also the creator of the award-winning Go-Go Sports Dolls, books and apps which encourage healthy and active play over beauty and body image. Jodi has been featured on The Today Show, The Real Story with Gretchen Carlson, Forbes, Parents, and Huffington Post, among other media outlets, and was invited by the Biden administration to be part of the groundbreaking Gender Policy Council and thought leaders on policy as it relates to children's toys, content, and publishing. On today's podcast, we are announcing her book, and we are proud to coincide with the publication of her book, More Than a Doll. We are talking about what the statistics tell her about when girls fall out of sports and into the race for unattainable perfection. We're looking at what Jodi learned when she tried to launch a realistic line of dolls for girls, and we are diving into why it is, in fact, never just a doll. I will start with, for the long-term confidence of a girl, what has the larger impact? What she's told or what she sees?
I really can't say, one is stronger than the other. It's like a paper cutter, right? They're just small little cuts that add up to become like this giant wound. So we see these throughout our lives. For instance, I was told when I was younger, I was praised for my sensitivity. I was praised for my kindness. I was praised for my empathy and compassion. I was that kid where the teacher would say, hey, listen, blah, blah, blah is, sitting alone at lunch. Will you include this person? Of course, I would say yes. I saw this as my strength, and I was really proud of it. But as I grew older and as I got into high school, I started to hear that my empathy, my compassion, my sensitivity, that was my weakness. I was too kind. I was, too sensitive. And then even my guidance counselor senior year in college or high school said to me, you know what, bottom line, you're just really too nice to go into business. I think you're better suited for a secretary or somebody else's assistant. I mean, this is back in the 80s. And I was like, what? No, it's like, yes, I'm nice, but it doesn't prevent me from being, assertive, aggressive, or just even ambitious. So I'm glad I didn't take her advice. Girls see images, whether it's in their advertising, their media, their books. We tell them they're strong, they're capable, they're smart, they are, athletic. But then we hand them, say, a doll that's dressed inappropriately, or we market clothes to them that are inappropriate. Or within their books, there have been so many studies out there that show that female characters are left out of books. I think it was Florida State did a study between 1900 and 2000, and they studied 6,000 children's books, and they found that 33% of the books had female characters. 100% of the books had male characters.
There's this discrepancy between what we hear and what we observe as girls growing up, and just frankly as women living right now. Right? Just forget even when we're little girls. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I'm always working on the messaging with her. She comes in, she sees me doing my makeup in the morning. Mama, I want to try that. Mama, can I have that? And I say, sure, you can play with whatever you want. And it's fun to feel pretty, but it's not important. I'm hoping it'll be burned into her brain.
And I do want to, tell you, because you were talking about your daughter watching you, put on makeup and stuff. I think you can be feminine and a feminist, right? You can love your fashion, and I do. But my point is that this doesn't define us, like what you said, right? Like we all like to look nice, but it does not define us. And I found that there were 75 lines of fashion dolls on the market. There was nothing else. Very, obviously some baby dolls and some rag dolls, but in the toy industry, the departments, right, within the buying teams, it's a baby doll or it's a fashion doll. You don't have anything else.
Right. So you're a caretaker in training, or you are a Lolita by proxy. Sort of those are the choices.
Right. So you look at dolls like this, or you look at the Bratz dolls, or, you can even look at Barbie. I know Barbie, Barbie's in a category all by herself. But anyway, if a young girl starts to dress like this to school, right? And we've heard these stories. They are, shamed, right? They're told to go put on their gym uniform. They're told to go to the principal's office, call their parents or caregiver for a change of clothing, or worse, they're suspended. So my point is that we're slapping the wrong hands. We slap and shame these young girls for imitating, which is human nature, to imitating what they see in their media, in their toys, and their books. So
we're shaming them for imitating what we're giving them to imitate.
Exactly. So it's so confusing. Yeah. It's so confusing to them.
And I think what's interesting is you sort of make the point that what we're teaching our girls is not necessarily just about beauty and its importance. What we're teaching our girls implicitly is that the way they should operate in the world is by prioritizing their ability to read the feedback they get from others on whether it's okay to exist the way they're existing at this moment. It is your responsibility to note how everyone else feels about the way that you're behaving and to respond accordingly. And that's not necessarily a message that boys are getting. How would you respond to someone who says it's just a doll?
Yeah, it's just a doll. It's just a piece of clothing. It's just a show. They all add up. This doesn't just affect girls. It affects boys as well, right? Like, what if we showed boys these images other than sexy dolls for girls? Would that change their perception of women in the workforce? Would that create equal pay? Would that create less harassment? I mean, it would be a simple experiment, but we would never know until, we gave it a try. But I say, yes, it would. It definitely would.
Well, and you are a boy mom and a girl mom. So, like myself, you understand some of the complexities of maneuvering, building up girls to try to buoy them against what we know society is going to give them. But at the same time, being aware that we need to provide context for our boys. So, before you made the leap from being horrified in the toy aisle to launching the Go-Go Girls sports themed doll and books line, you delved into the research. What did you learn about the timing? What did you learn about the timing and or reasons for girls dropping out of sports?
Well, I found that in my research. Between the ages of 5 and 10 are a critical time for girls. It's a time when they start to develop concerns about body image. And by the age 9, research shows that a girl's confidence peaks, and that's when she starts to feel the need to conform to a way a girl should look, should act, and should feel. So that right there is, a really, in my opinion, a very sad statistic, right? And at the time, I found that 1 out of 3 girls played a sport by the time they were 6 years old. That's basically 17 million girls in the U.S. play one sport a year. But then we're starting to see, and still now, just because girls become self-conscious around puberty, with their breasts and with their period, and they're just uncomfortable. So and again, they don't want to, sometimes it's not favorable in certain cultures to be in a sport, right? They start to focus more on their appearance versus what their minds and bodies can do. So they're looking more on their appearance. So, like the Tucker Institute out of the University of Minnesota has done a great job of looking at how do we keep girls in sports. The Women's Sports Foundation is doing a great job with that as well. Statistics from The Gist, they're doing, Caroline Fitzgerald is doing a wonderful job throwing out statistics on why girls should stay in sports. But it's societal, it's cultural. We see young girls dropping out right around puberty.
You quoted Rachel Simmons, who's an author, saying, quote, "We're asking girls for effortless perfection." But your book does a very good job of showing how really any success is just not giving up, right? It's just not giving up. And this concept of effortless perfection is a fallacy. What was interesting to me was when you started to do the research and started to look at the major toy manufacturers, arguably they've got so much of the market share. They've got the aisle space. They've got the eyeballs of people. They already know they're going to sell within an order of margin of error every year because they control the market. And then you talk about the study by the Gina Davis Institute and how when they found out things that did not paint them in the most positive light, they decided not to use it. Tell me about the study from the Gina Davis Institute.
I was seeing a discrepancy in the selling of my product and what I was hearing from the media, what I was hearing from parents, what I was seeing on the shelves, right? So I was working with the Toy Foundation. I had started with a good friend of mine, great colleague of mine. Her name is Laurel Wider, and she started a line of dolls for boys called Wonder Crew. We are so like-minded, and we're just great in this partnership because she comes at it as an angle of wanting to encourage nurturing and empathy in boys, which is just, we're all born with this, right? So instead of saying to boys, squash that's a weakness, let's not squash this for boys because this is needed in boys. And so anyway, you can see why our partnership was so good. The Toy Foundation is an arm of the Toy Association. It's their philanthropic arm. And so we asked them if we could commission a research because Laurel and I had been, shouting from the mountaintops for years, we're just two small companies that are trying to make a loud noise. And we did this along with some other women within the toy industry who had small companies as well, and brands. But, we weren't being heard. So the Toy Foundation said, yes, we will commission this with the Gina Davis Institute on gender in media. And it was great. Obviously, the Gina Davis Institute did a fabulous job with this report. And it really just solidified everything that Laurel and I had been saying for decades. That yes, there are these blatant stereotypes, not just in the products, but in the words that are used for girls. Beautiful, friendship, family, kindness. And then boys will hear, like adventure, worldly, and then they'll see, music is more aggressive with the boys. With the girls, it's more calming, right? So these are all that are added, like the colors, everything's bright and pink and purple. The boys are more muted colors. So it's, all these, they're subtle, right? They're just very subtle that come into play. So the Gina Davis Institute did a great job in a 33-page, report. So once the Toy Foundation received it, they agreed with us, but they said we can't move forward with that because it shows some key players in a negative light.
Right.
And I'm like, that's the point, that is the point. And Laurel, in her brilliance, suggested that we take out all company names. And then the Toy Foundation, it took a while and some convincing, but they agreed for us to be, they said, just take all our names off, the Toy Foundation, Toy Association, any company names, your report, do what you want with it. Right. And so to their credit, I'm glad they allowed us to release the report. But my question is, who are we protecting?
Exactly. Do we act on the findings of this report? If we act on the findings of this report and we take half the shelf space and we put it towards dolls who look like actual human girls and act like actual human girls, and we put the other half of the shelf space, all of which we control, towards lovely Lolas, how many months or quarters would it take to get back to the same level of income? But at some point, a decision was made that it wasn't worth that, and that's the depressing piece, I think, about it.
Well, I think that goes back to my journey of launching this doll. It was very difficult. It's what I didn't realize is it's really hard to challenge the status quo, to create change, to battle gender stereotypes. I thought I had the next best thing. But a lot of the comments, and that I write about in the book, is when I would present the dolls to toy buyers, the pushback that I would get was always, positive in the beginning. Like, oh, I love this doll. I love Soccer Girl. My daughter plays soccer. She would love this doll. And I'd say, how many would you like to buy? And they'd say, I'd always get the hand. No. I'm not going to buy the doll. And I always say, why? You just said it was like, an amazing, doll, and your daughter would love it. And the comments were always, girls like fashion. Can you create a fashion doll? And my point is that when you only have 75 brands of fashion dolls and nothing else, of course they're going to gravitate towards fashion because they have nothing else to gravitate towards. And again, as a mother of a daughter and as a woman, I'm just positive girls like more than fashion. There's so much more that defines us. So you kind of you can use the analogy of the nut industry, right? So the nut industry, like when I was growing up, all we had was peanut butter, right? That's all you had to choose from. Right. So what if a girl said, well, all you have is, my customers only like peanut butter. And then now we have the almond butter, and then we have the pistachio butter, and, cashew butter, whatever butter, nut butter you want.
Right.
That didn't take away from the peanut butter, sales, but it did add to the nut butter sales. Yeah.
And it's possible not everybody wants sexy peanut butter every day, right?
Exactly.
It's possible.
The toy industry can be antiquated at times, and they have a wash, rinse, repeat cycle. So fashion dolls have always worked. Ever since Barbie, those 75 brands of fashion doll happened after Barbie.
Ah.
So, they're always looking for the next best thing. And I don't think it's a fashion doll anymore. I think, let Barbie have her place. That's fine. That's fine. But if a girl would like a sports doll, I mean, under my umbrella of Dream Big Toy Company, part of my dream was to eventually add, a go-go cooking girl, a go-go, music boy, a go-go sports boy, because kids are just so diverse, just like adults. And, my philosophy has always been, if we encourage what is genuinely who they are, we will have a happier society. We'll have, a culture that embraces, what they're good at, what an individual is good at, instead of pigeonholing our kids to be a certain thing. Like, boys, you should be aggressive, and girls, you should be pretty. And not every kid follows that, but they do get confusing and conflicting messages along the way.
And I think the point is we need to be willing to find out, right? The industry needed to be willing to find out.
I've done speaking events to young girls, right? And which is always so much fun. But one question I always ask them when I speak is, if you had a half a day or a full day on a Saturday afternoon, let's just say half a day, Saturday afternoon, that you could do whatever you want to do, what will that be? You just tell me. And I mean, of course they want to tell you. They're like, cooking, play with my dog, swim, play with my friends, play the piano, read under the tree, go for a bike ride, jump rope, all these things. I mean, they're just so excited to, tell you what they want to do. Not one said, I want to go to the mall and go shopping, or I want to dress up, my fancy clothes, or I want to look like Lovely Lola. Nobody, young girls, not one said, that's what they wanted to do or alluded to that.
Right. It's funny, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking in my head, what if someone asked me that question? What could you do on a Saturday if you could do whatever you wanted, right? I'm not the 7-year-old version, I'm the 47-year-old version. And it just sort of highlights the difference between what we know we want versus what we are told that we want. Because the girl knows what she wants to do is run and laugh and jump and play and be. What she's told she wants is to go to the mall and buy shiny things. What the 47-year-old knows she wants to do on a Saturday is nap, eat carbs, and not be touched, right? I mean, is that not, but under a blanket, right?
Right.
And yes, and not talk to anybody who annoys me or disagrees with me in really any way. What society tells me I want to do is mix some collagen into my coffee, maybe do some Pilates, plan someone's summer vacations, and moisturize. Like that's what society's telling me I want to do. So I just kind of want to like draw that through line from the beginning all the way, and maybe we should reject.
Yeah.
Right? I would love it if you asked the question to the moms too. Among other things, when you talk about the process of creating the doll, you wrote about the inaccuracy of the body proportions of girl dolls, which really made me angry. But based on your research, or even just based on your opinion, your experience, do you suspect that the measurements of little girl dolls are being exaggerated because they get the attention of the parent walking the doll aisle? Or do you suspect that it's because exaggerated measurements tap into some innate need to aspire to being a woman?
I think there's a connection there between, the start of Barbie, right, and that body type. So that was probably the catalyst of it all. And, everybody kind of just went along with, how Barbie looks. And I think that it is what we are told as a, growing up back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, you were supposed to be thin. You were supposed to have those long legs, you were supposed to have the blonde hair and the blue eyes. And, that was like your, American girl. But I think that when I was designing these dolls, well, okay, go back to Barbie just a little bit. I do think that that body type was labeled as perfection. And so going back to your point in the beginning about perfection, right, is that, you know, we put this pressure on women, and what Rachel had said too, you know, and there are so many books that, that it's just, there's no end to perfection, right? And so if women, I think perfection is imposed upon women a lot. You know, we're young, we're supposed to, you know, have, you know, be the perfect little girl, be the perfect student, have the perfect hair, you know, and then as we get older, you know, you have to have the perfect clothes, the perfect kids, the perfect, you know, dinner, the perfect house, that, you know, it's all bullshit. You know, it's just like throw that stuff out the window, because there, you know, we can all strive for improvement. But if we get caught up in the perfection, it takes away our creativity, it takes away our uniqueness, it takes away our quirks, the things that make us special. So I just, when I designed the doll, my daughter was 9, obviously, and I just measured her and all her little friends. I mean, they still have these funny memories. You know, I'd say, you know, oh my God, so look at this, stop. I'm like, I have to measure you. You want to measure their head, you know, and their wingspan, the length of their torso, their legs. And so I shrunk it down to be in correct proportion to a little girl's body. But I really hate the word perfection so much. And I just wish that, you know, you can strive to make the perfect cookie, I guess. But, and other than that, I would just say, just forget about it.
Well, I tell my kids all the time, perfect is a dirty word. Mommy doesn't like that word. Perfect is a dirty word because it doesn't mean anything. I just don't like it. For my son either.
Yeah, I agree.
But in particular for my daughter, but I can't message it that way. So I just say it's a dirty word in our house. I know it's going to hurt her more, but they're not ready for that message.
So I've been doing this a long time. There are different issues when they become young women. I mean, I heard the first of this years ago, and this just freaks me out. But there was a couple young women at a speaking event, and I was staying for lunch, and I could see that they were kind of hovering by me. And they sat down at the table, and I said, looks like you want to ask me something. And at the time, they were probably in their mid-20s. And they said, you know, we're getting a lot of pressure from doctors to get Botox as preventatives. I'm like, wait, what? Wait, preventative for what? Aging. And you know, and I'm like, please don't, you're beautiful, don't mess with that. Like, you're 20-something, do not mess with that. And I don't want to get into all of, you know, the whole Botox thing, or, you know, whatever people want to do. Yeah. But when we're marketing this stuff to kids, to young women, as a preventative, I mean, it just makes me so sad, because it's those insecurities that our culture is creating for women.
And with the context that we're both saying you should do whatever you want, but you should be sure that you are doing what you want.
Right.
Right? And that's the distinction people aren't making. A doctor telling you to prevent aging that you yourself are not yet sure you're worried about is really offensive to me. I mean, I would get right up and walk out. But I interviewed a woman named Amanda Hansen, and she's known as the midlife muse. She talks a lot about aging naturally and not judging other women for doing what they want to do. But she's very aggressive about her point that there is a sacredness to aging that we in society have forgotten. And it used to be revered, and it used to be beautiful, and it used to be extolled on some level. The reason I bring her up is to say, along the lines of those young women talking to you, she told me that one of the biggest groups that give her feedback, and she has a massive following, are young women. And they're constantly emailing her and messaging her and saying, you're like my mom. Like, I'm so glad you're saying these things. Nobody's saying these things. Please keep saying these things. Women, young women too, even as much as they've been hurt by growing up watching shows like Nip Tuck and all this nonsense in their formative years, as much as they grew up with that, there's a huge proportion of these quote unquote still somewhat young women, I would say anyone under 35 is still young, who do crave a different story and do have that innate understanding that there's a different way to look at themselves, and they're hungry for this information. So I think your book is going to certainly hit a nerve on that. Dolls matter, words matter, And I love the story you told about watching Billie Jean King's famous match. I love that story. I want you to set the scene and tell me the story about watching the Billie Jean King match with your dad, because it is so illustrative of the mixed signals we all get and we just accept.
Yeah, it was my first experience, I guess, realization of sexism. And it wasn't because of Bobby Riggs and his pomp and circumstances. It was because of my dad. Yeah. And it really made me sad because I was 9 years old, which is kind of ironic because it was the age Grace was when I had that aha moment of lovely Lola. But when I was 9 years old, I was a huge tennis fan, and I loved Billie Jean King. And I was so excited to watch this match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. Now, Bobby Riggs, if people out there don't know who Bobby Riggs is, at the time he was in his 50s, and he was a male chauvinist, and I think he actually was proud and kind of alluded to that in many of his interviews, and he was proud to be a chauvinist. And he challenged Billie Jean King, who at the time was, I believe, 28 years old, to a match. And I was so excited to watch it. I mean, it was all over, ads for it, and it was just like a big to-do. And actually today is still the most watched tennis match ever. Can you believe that?
I do. Because it was so meaningful. Even as she was going up to do it, she knew how meaningful it was going to be. Remember, you made a comment in the book, you quoted her as saying she knew she couldn't lose.
She knew she couldn't lose for multiple reasons, mainly for women. So the first set, she won. Well, first of all, going back to my dad, right? So I come into our living room. Back in the 70s, it was everything was gold. So it was just like gold shag carpet, gold furniture, gold. And so I'm sitting on the floor, and my dad is sitting on the couch, and I'm like, oh, Dad, I'm so excited about this. I can't wait to watch Billie kick Bobby's butt. And he looked at me and he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm just really excited for her to win. And my dad said, well, she's not going to win. I said, well, yes, she is. And he said, no. A woman can't beat a man. And I was so sad. I was so upset. And I looked at my dad and I said, yes. And I said, she can. And she won the first set. She won the second set. She won the third set. And I said to my dad, I said, see, I said, a woman can beat a man. And I remember my dad's face was just like, I can't believe this happened, right? I can't believe she beat him. And it made me realize that, my dad had always been so supportive of me. He still is. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this through my life, how, and I think this is part of our cultural issue. Men want the best for the women in their lives, whether it be their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, their wives, their grandmothers, whomever, their friends. But when it comes to a population, women collectively, there's not that same support. So
I think it illustrates the fact that the programming is deep in the men too.
It is.
Because this man loved his daughter. It's not as if your father was running around trying to tamp anybody's light out. But that knee-jerk response was him saying he couldn't see a world where she would beat him. He wasn't trying to hurt his daughter, Jodi, and in that moment, in that encapsulated moment, I'm sure a 9-year-old Jodi knew that. And so these are just another one of those micro moments where we start to learn that we have to translate the behavior and the statements of the people around us through the lens of what we believe about their intentions. It sucks because the mental load starts then. You're 9 and you start the mental load.
It is absolutely exhausting. But you are so right. I mean, it's almost like becoming aware of some of these things that are happening.
You don't articulate it, and you learn to become so forgiving of people's missteps and so forgiving of people's default to the programming that hurts you. And you spend your whole life trying to unlearn it, which is really terrible.
And I do talk about, gosh, I'm going to take a quote from somebody. She's online, the feminist. I can't remember. When our light bulb does go off, or when our room does start to get bright, then it's our job to continue to hand out flashlights, right? And sometimes I feel like, gosh, it can be such a curse too, because you see these inequities throughout our culture. And I know we're not going to fix all of them, and it is life and nothing is perfect. But if we could strive for improvement, I do feel like we would balance out that gender equality in life.
Speaking about shining the flashlight, so much of it is really, again, what we hear versus what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And you went on Fox and Friends to promote the dolls.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about this in the book. You developed a friendship with Gretchen Carlson, and so much of your work has expanded far beyond the dolls, far beyond the books, towards real activism to shine that light, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hurting ourselves and our girls. So much of your work expands beyond the toys to
Mm-hmm.
how people learn to process the ways they are perceived, how girls learn perhaps the cost of standing up against the weight of how others perceive them.
Mm-hmm.
In that vein, tell me why it was important to go on air makeup free with Gretchen Carlson. How did that feel? Because it wasn't being done at the time.
No, not at all. I don't think it really is any, right now, but it was, she had her own show at the time, The Real Story with Gretchen Carlson. And from time to time, whenever I was in New York, she would, I'd call her up and she'd say, come on. But I was promoting International Day of the Girl. And her producer called the morning I was supposed to be on and said, hey, listen, Gretchen wants to know if you would come on her show, Makeup Free, to promote girl empowerment. And I'm like, I really don't care, right? Like, no one knows me, and who cares? That's fine.
No one knows me. Who cares?
I don't really care. So I did. And what struck me is when I was, in the studio with her, when we went on live, she came on and said, for the first time in cable news history, my guest, and then she introduced me, and I are on live television sans makeup. And I thought to myself, wow, how crazy is it that this is a big deal? Like, guys are on TV all the time without a ton of makeup. Now, I have been on Fox before, 10 years ago, with the amount of makeup is insane. Like, it hurts. Like, you can feel it on your face. So, to be, sans makeup, I was like, well, I cannot believe this is a big deal.
That it's considered brave.
It's considered brave. And she got in a lot of trouble. And that's kind of was the beginning of her, getting out of Fox and taking it down with Roger Ailes. She was, and it was, she was saying, no one's going to put out my light. And I was happy to do that with her.
Was the energy in the studio with the staff and with the rest of the team nervous?
No.
Like, what's going to happen?
They seem really supportive. They're like, this is great. Gretchen's doing this. I love it.
That's nice. That's nice to hear. Because you need a team on board, especially if you're going to do things that are considered brave. Like, people are making a big deal about Pam Anderson going makeup free.
Oh, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it makes me happy for her, especially given the life that she's had and how much it has been about her beauty and how scary it must be for her in that situation. It makes me feel like sort of sisterhood of women, happy for her, And
to that point, and I'm just going to go off a little bit off topic here, kind of sort of, but in watching what were the movie awards that were just on?
The Emmys? Is it the Emmys? Wait, not the Grammys.
No.
The Tonys?
No. Maybe it was the Emmys. I don't know. Anyway. But I found it interesting, just, being on social media, seeing some of the questions. And one in particular was asked to Jodie Foster. And they asked, what does it feel like to age or to grow old or something like that? And I'm like, seriously? Like, are any guys ever asked this question? What does it feel like to age? I just wish these questions would stop, right? And, I do write about Jane Fonda and, some of the, how strong she has been. And one of the things that she says that she has regrets is, getting as much work done as she has, on her, her body. But I have to think that, number one, growing old for any woman is difficult. And number two, in the public eye has to be incredibly difficult for a woman. I just, I guess I have a wish that just ask Jodie Foster about her, her kick-ass career. Quit asking, don't ask her like, what does it feel like to age? It's, she was very
Or can we go in the other direction, because I'm a little bit less dignified than you? And can the canned response for all women who are asked that question, what does it feel like to age, be probably feels exactly what it feels like to lose half your testosterone? You tell me.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, it's gone, right? Like you feel it right now, dude. Don't you? You need a hug. Can that be our answer? Because that's gonna be my answer if anybody ever asks me. Nobody's ever gonna ask me, but that's where I'm going. On a related note, the other day my daughter was in the shower and she was singing, and I couldn't figure out what she was singing. And I got closer and closer, and thank God I got this on video. She was in there singing, "I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair," because she could see they've been talking about the woman who originally sang it recently passed away, and she's in the shower singing it. She's 4 years old. "I'm gonna wash the man right out of my hair." Not that we don't love men on this podcast, but I'm just saying that it's good stuff.
Yeah,
I can just pipe that sound in as part of the soundtrack in this moment.
Awesome, right?
Because it's awesome. It's good stuff. It shows you how easily suggestible our girls are.
Yeah.
So let's go to your lightning round.
Okay.
Question number 1.
Mm-hmm.
If your daughter tells you she is pregnant with your granddaughter, what words of counsel will you give her?
Well, it would be very lengthy. I would have to really sit down and write a letter. And I would say to my daughter, and I know this, that if she has a little girl, that little girl is going to be strong. She's going to be smart. She's going to be adventurous, and just let her go. It's going to be hard at times, because my daughter was hard at times, but I would definitely say, let her go and just be there for her, because she's going to rule the world. She's going to make a difference. And I tell my kids that too. I said, not to put a lot of pressure on you, but it's your job, your generation, to create change. You're the one.
And by the way, Grandma wrote this book for her.
You need to write a children's book for that.
Exactly. You could write a kid's version of it. And my final question, if you could go back to the morning of the Billie Jean King match, you can talk to your 9-year-old self, and you know what your 9-year-old self is going to hear from a father who she knows really loves her. Before the Billie Jean King match, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that observe, because this is the beginning of what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life.
Love it. See, Billie Jean King was right. She could not lose that match.
I know. She did say that it wasn't just for tennis, but it would move the needle for women in sports. And not only sports, but, and then, Title I, obviously. So, yeah, I admire her for so many reasons. I mean, she has been a force in equality. She's been unbelievable.
Well, thank you for helping move the needle yourself with your book, with your activism, with everything that you do. And thank you for being on the podcast.